that maybe it's not about money, maybe it's something else. So what the heck are you talking about, Jim? Tell us.
You know, one of the questions is, what did we do before money? How did we work as species? I mean, yeah, we created shells and this and that, but the point is that prosperity is about a lifestyle. It's about synchronicity, harmony, and order. It's about how things happen. When people reduce it to money, they're getting way off track. I like to think that, for example, the value of money is changing right now. The United States government's printing money like crazy. Values are going down. Everything's changing, and if prosperity was tied to money, we would really go in a hole. And what my work is about is becoming immune to our surroundings, and true prosperity is of our own making, and frankly, it's about the quality of our connection. As we have more synchronicity in our life, as we have more order in our life unfolds in a better manner, and we simply have magic. And magic is what we're all looking for. We want that synchronicity and that light step that everything is going the way it should go.
So, I guess then what did we have prior to, I mean, money? What was going on then?
Okay, so that's the point. Everything operated by goodwill. Everything. Let's look at nature. Nature abounds in prosperity. Nature abounds in life. Nature abounds in everything that's important. You know, goodwill, just the capacity to go through your day with, like I say, a lilt in your step. It's an attitude. It's a place that when we operate. See, what we're really trying to do here is re-enable our natural state of connection with the cosmos, because that's our natural state. And when we're in our natural state, let me adjust my screen here a little bit. When we're in our natural state, prosperity is evident. Now let's look at nature. Nature is naturally plugged in to the cosmos. It's naturally plugged into the divine. I call it innate intelligence. And there's a commonality that everything shares. There's an order that everything shares. Some people call it God. And when you have this connection, naturally, which all of nature does, you have prosperity. So if you want a definition of prosperity, you look to the nature. Back when I used to do a lot of sailing, I used to talk about lobster. Lobsters lay, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of eggs, and only a few of them actually become lobster. The rest of them are for all the different kinds of the way animals live, and they feed off each other, and so there's an abundance of everything, and that's the definition of prosperity. And the way humans move into prosperity is not by how much money they can put together and save. It's more about this natural state of connection for which guidance becomes available, presence becomes available, and in these natural states, prosperity ensues. Now, we were talking before we started here about this article I wrote in 2007 called Free Cell and the Keys to the Universe. I wrote it just after I finished Visionaries Thrive in All Times, my first book. And the idea was, first off, writing that book, 93,000-word book, was a huge project. It was unexpected. And as I wrote it, I would get stymied from time to time just because of the enormity of the product, of the process. And there came a point where, in discovering Free Cell, the game Free Cell, which comes on everybody's computers, or all Windows-based computers, I'd play this game, and I eventually learned that as I would start to lose the game, if I would walk away from the game, because I'm losing, and if I'd catch myself instead of just mindlessly completing the game and losing, if I would walk away, excuse me, and come back later, I would see moves I couldn't see. That's an important idea, to recognize that everything is in front of us if but we could see it. And that's what this little game, Free Cell in the article, Free Cell and the Keys of the Universe, displays. And so what I'm trying to say is that prosperity is something that's natural. It's not about how much money is coming out of the mint. It's not about whether money is backed by gold or silver, or it's not about cash, and it's not about stocks and bonds. It's about our connection. It's about the magic that the connection delivers. And again, you can see it in all of nature. I saw something just recently. It's talking about an apple tree, I think, and I use the apple tree as an analogy a lot. And the apple tree gives. It gives its apples, it gives its shade, it gives oxygen to the air. I don't remember. I've looked for that. There was a Facebook image, and it had all these attributes of the apple tree. And an apple tree only gives. And I think you'll find in nature everything gives, and that's the commonality, the sharing, that is prosperity. It's being part of that whole. And so that's why I say, what if prosperity has nothing to do with money? Because in fact it doesn't. It's a state of being, and the only way we're going to get this state of being is getting back to the natural state of connection.
So how do you define prosperity?
Well, I think I just did, but prosperity is that overall sharing that everything that's connected shares. In other words, everything is, not only is it, first off, everything is plugged into a central guidance system. Some people call it God, I call it source, I call it innate intelligence, I call it, the divine occasionally, and I use different terms, that they're all synonymous with God. And you see, everything is a subset. If God's the creator, and I'm not going to get into who God is, because God could be aliens as far as I'm concerned, and it's kind of incidental to what I want to talk about, but everything is a subset of God. And in that subset, everything is connected. And it's in that connection that prosperity ensues. In other words, this over here does that. This over here does that. Something over here does that. Something over here does that. And it all melds. And it's in that melding that prosperity exists.
So is prosperity more of you're saying that it's an energy, it's a thought, it's a way of life, it's a concept? Again, what are you saying?
I would say for what occurs to me is it's a frequency.
It's an energy.
No, an energy to me is different. A frequency is different than an energy. In fact, I was just reading something. Who was the scientist? He was Thomas Edison, and who was his competitor with static electricity, taking static electricity out of the air? Who am I thinking of?
Thomas Edison?
No, his when I say his contemporary, who's the famous guy? Famous scientist.
Tesla?
Tesla, thank you. I think it was Tesla that said, or maybe it was Einstein, that everything's a frequency, and if you match up frequencies, then it's kind of foundation behind the Rife machines and things like that. But I would say that prosperity is a frequency because order is a frequency. And when you have order, you have order. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of order you have in a court or when you buy a burger somewhere. I'm talking about a central governance, a benign central governance that everything abides by. I teach sovereignty, I teach personal empowerment, and the question is, are we on our own or not? And I say that we're not, and you can see that in nature. Everything in nature is plugged into something bigger, and actually, when we're out of sync with that, we're not prosperous. Okay, we can have lots of money, but there's lots of people with lots of money that aren't happy. And so money does not guarantee anything. And so my work says that the planet has to go in the direction of becoming more in sync with the whole, and then the humans become more prosperous as a species. And then the question is the planet prosperous? That means, is it carrying its own weight in the universe? I mean, is it in the solar system, or do we have the issue of we have atomic bombs, which are extremely destructive, and bigger bombs than that? They can throw the solar system out of balance, possibly. That's kind of an extreme example, but the question is, the humans are in a harmonic of the order that everything abides by, or they're not. And my work says is that we need to line up with what's true, and in doing that we become prosperous.
Yeah, but everything in this universe, in all the universes, everywhere you go to, is energy, Jim. So I would venture to say, even though you consider it a frequency is still energy. Well,
it's really kind of splitting hairs, because it's just how we want to define the terms. It's incidental. You know, what I like to say is that you know, money used to have value, and now it's printed by the government, and for us to hold on to that as our security, and to represent our stability and our security, and it's really a weak idea. We need to plug into something that's more, because as the dollar goes down, or as the dollar changes, our lifestyles change. And that is not a very healthy way. In other words, there's nothing prosperous about being tied to money for the security and the comfort it offers, because it's something that's value can change any day. I mean, there's stories going on that the gold that's supposed to be in the vaults of Fort Knox are not there, and the next time the Chinese announce how much bullion they have, it gets discovered that the Americans don't have the bullion they say they do, and all of a sudden the dollar loses its value. And if our prosperity is tied to the dollar or tied to money, we're kind of out of luck. And I like to say that nature is a much better example of give and take, of trade, of all the different kinds of things that we consider as commerce, and all the different kind of things we do. It can all be found in nature, and I think we're much better off plugging into a system that's been there for a very long time and actually works.
So now, as I understand you, you're saying that prosperity is relative to whatever system you're applying it to. Is that what I hear you saying?
No, I'm saying there's a false understanding that. I'll give you the best analogy. We have a system, and it's called nature. Nature extends out past this planet. It extends out as far as you can imagine, and farther than that. And this system of nature has a central governance. Some people call it God, whatever. Now the humans came along, and they set up their own. A long time ago, humans were totally plugged into nature. We abided by the rules, you know, tides and all the cycles of nature were very important to us. There came a time when, there was a time when that's all there was. They were called pagans and heathens and on, but there was a time when humans lived more in sync with what was natural. As we got wiser and smarter, so to speak, we eventually created our own economic system. Now, an economic system is a man-made version of nature. In other words, we went from a natural system to an artificial system, and that's what the economic system is. And curiously, the economic system, the foundation of it is money, and whoever has the most wins, blah, blah, blah. And it's curious that people refer to money as God. What's the term they use? The almighty dollar. And so what's happened is humans have gotten out of sync with our natural state, and we've bought into this man-made version or this man-made system, which, because it's man-made, it has limitations, and frankly, it doesn't work. We're in all kinds of throes of things breaking down. So when I talk about prosperity, I'm talking about real prosperity. Real prosperity is not found in the man-made economic system. That's my opinion.
And exactly. So you're saying that you can be prosperous in nature, but you can also be prosperous in the man-made system, but it's not as real as it is in nature, or maybe not real at all. Is that what I hear you saying?
I'm saying it's not real at all, and yes, people have to live with one foot in both worlds, but you see what core resonance is about? It's about re-enabling our natural state of connection. I say that our nervous system is our center, that it's our core, and so what core resonance is about is everything is a subset of God, and so everything is a means by which God or innate intelligence expresses into this dimension. And the human beings, because of our sophistication, got out of sync with that natural state of governance. And when we got out of sync with that natural state of governance, we lost access to guidance. And guidance is what everything else on this planet, it's how everything is able to sync. It's the guidance that everything shares. And when the humans got out of sync with that, this is what core resonance is about, is that the nervous system, the biggest single component of the nervous system, the brain, converted from being part of a receiver. Because you see, our nervous system, like a living antenna system, we're receivers, just like everything else in nature. And when we got out of sync with our natural state of connection, a component of the nervous system converted over and became a processor. And so the brain, that's where the brain became a processor. In other words, when we're out of our natural state of connection, it has to anticipate what's going on, and so that we're not surprised. And what's happened is the brain got on overload in a hurry, and then, in my opinion, it set up the mind as a repository of automated, habitual, and reactionary responses. And we live in these automated habits and patterns, and we've severely limited ourselves. And so this is the point. You've got this man-made world that everybody's kind of fumbling around in. And by the way, we're about to overrun our ability to stay on the planet. We've done so much damage to the water and the atmosphere and the different things. And so what core resonance is about is quieting the nervous system so that this subtle connection with source or innate intelligence can be identified and built on. And so re-enabling our natural state of connection is really what prosperity is about. Because as we re-enable our natural state, we come into a state of connection and shared camaraderie with everything on this planet that already works.
So now the question is, how does that relate to our future in terms of prosperity in the future? Because the nature that we'll be involved with in the future won't be the same as it is now on this planet. The nature that we'll be involved in will be space stations, spaceships, and whatever else. So how does that relate to that?
Well, first off, there's an assumption that we're going to just keep going the way we are, and I don't think it's true. I think that the natural evolution, as we wake up as a species, is back toward our connection. I think that innately all of us are looking for the truth. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have spaceships and things in orbit and all these kinds of things and go into other planets, but it's about re-enabling our natural state of connection so that when we go into orbit and go in farther out, that we're in a state of harmonics with the overall whole. In other words, we're beneficent. We're contributors to the unfolding of the good that this whole universe is based on. In other words, if we're at odds with that long enough, we're going to get snuffed out. You can't exist at odds with the whole in the long run. It takes an enormous amount of effort. And
so I guess the point is that, you know, we can call nature here on Earth, you know, the earth, the trees and the flowers and the shrubs and all the stuff, the water, the rivers, the mountains, the air. We can call that nature, but the nature that we experience here is not the same nature as on other planets, on other systems, on space station, on the spaceship. So how would that, how would prosperity relate to those systems? And I don't know. Do we have an answer for that? I don't know that we have an answer for that.
No, wait. You're misunderstanding what nature is. Nature is the governance behind the bushes and the shrubs, as you call them, and the flowers. It's not about carrying flowers on spaceships. Nature is not a bunch of bushes. Nature is the underlying order that everything shares. That I said nature extends out to the planets. That the planets remain in a, first off, they remain in a harmonic among themselves. The planets, the solar system has its own song, it has its own frequency, and there's an order that everything shares. Nature, see, you're using the term, I'm using the term nature as an overall governance that underlies everything, and you're thinking it's bushes. And it's not. Bushes are an expression of nature.
Well, the planet. I mean, planet is nature, right?
That's exactly right. The order that everything shares. And what I'm trying to point out is the humans are out of sync with nature.
They're with their own nature. Is that what I hear you saying?
They're their own nature? No. Humans are out of sync with nature. If we were in sync with nature, the kind of decisions and choices we make would be very, very, very different. We wouldn't be arguing about whether women can have abortions or what women can do with their bodies and what women can do. There's so many things that would be done differently that the idea of war would be ridiculous. There's so many things that would be done differently if we were in sync with the larger whole. And the funny part is, back in the 60s, this is what the hippies wanted. They didn't want the way the world was going. They wanted to go back to the governance that nature offers. I'm not talking about sitting under a tree the rest of my life. I'm not talking about building houses out of Lincoln logs or logs. I'm not talking about old stuff like that. It's a governance. And in this governance, you'll find prosperity. In other words, in this governance, there's an order. And in this order, our life unfolds in a vastly different manner than it is now.
So maybe we're not using the right word, Jim. Maybe we need to talk about environment, prosperity in reference to our environment. Would that be closer to what we're trying to understand?
Nope, I don't think so. I mean, well, first off, we can make any term mean whatever we want it to mean, right?
Well, exactly.
What I'm trying to say is that nature is an overall guidance system, or it's an expression of an underlying guidance system, a governance that everything abides by. Everything.
So you're saying that that's a good foundation for prosperity. Is that what I hear you saying?
What I'm saying is, as the humans plug into what is true, they will become more prosperous as a species, and the planet itself will be prosperous.
Okay.
Right now, what do we have to export off this planet? What's one of the biggest things the United States government exports, and some of these other big countries? Weapons. Okay? That's out of sync with nature. That's out of sync with the overall whole. We could always say, well, this is what the humans do. Okay, it's true. The question is, how long are we going to be here as we continue this destructive pattern? And why do we have this destructive pattern? We're out of sync with our natural state.
Okay,
we're dysfunctional as hell as a species.
And I hear you.
That is not prosperous. That is not prosperity.
And I agree with you that that's more of a false prosperity, using technology as a foundation for prosperity, and I don't know that that's a real prosperity or not. I'm not sure. Is that what you're saying?
Well, first off, to me,
Because
technology.
aren't weapons and guns, aren't they a technology?
Anytime you do something that you repeat foundationally, that's what technology is. In other words, you could do affirmations and learn how to bilocate, and the affirmations would become a technology because they can produce repeatable results. So the idea that we build bigger bridges or we build atom smashers, that in my opinion is not necessarily prosperity. You can't say that everything the humans do is bad or dumb or stupid, and I certainly don't. And so you can find aspects of what we do as a species to be very revealing about our potential. And so, of course, there's aspects of, look at art. Art is a great example of prosperity that the human species produces, and so many things like that. Architecture.
Well, I got to go back to that because I think what is safe to say, Jim, is that art coming from the heart is a good foundation for prosperity, and I hear you saying that.
Good.
I can agree with that.
Okay, so that's a little island in the scale of shit of the world we live in. I mean, we're almost completely overwhelmed by our problems. Look at our Congress, look at our Senate, look at our president, look at these other countries and what our priorities are. And so, yes, the human spirit produces incredible things. But there's a lot of things that the governments force on the people and this and that. And in fact, I would say that the government and the church even do not support empowerment. And so while we have these these aspects of music, like I just bought some music, a guy plays cello. He's a vocalist, a cellist that does vocals, and he says they're few and far between. His music is wonderful, and he's probably only 26 years old. I hear Nora Jones in him, and I hear Paul Simon in him. The guy's 25 or 26 years old, and so that we all excel. The problem is the overall scheme of things that this world operates by is false, and as long as it's false, we're not going to be prosperous. So
I hear you.
Take your money home.
Exactly, and I agree with you 100%. Absolutely.
So what core resonance is about is re-enabling this natural state of connection with source, with innate intelligence, whatever you want to call it. And as we rebuild this connection, one of the things that happens is that we start having access to presence. And in presence, we have guidance. And in guidance, we make a different kind of set of choices than we're making from just the mind. And that's why I stress the idea that there's a governance out there that's invisible, that it's all through the planet, it's all through the stars, it's all through everywhere, and it's a matter of plugging into it, and then we become prosperous as a species. And when we leave this planet, we leave it, and we leave everything we touch better. And right now, that's not what we got at all. And so I say we're not prosperous at all. Okay, some people got more money. You know how many people are starving on this planet, or how much money, how much food we throw away, how much acreage the government pays farmers not to produce for certain reasons, when if we were prosperous as a species, we'd feed each other. We would take care of each other. But what we're doing, you got these countries that they don't have toilets, and they've all got AK-40. These guns cost $1,500 a piece. I don't even know what they cost. Bullets cost money now. This stuff isn't free, and these people have all this stuff, and they don't have water to drink. They've got gas pipes running through their countries that leak, or oil pipes running through their countries that leak, and you got trash, and you got all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm saying that we're out of sync with our natural state, therefore we are not prosperous. And so prosperity is about our natural state of connection, and I go back to my initial fundamental idea: what if prosperity has nothing to do with money? Because it doesn't. And money is actually I'm not going to say money's all bad, because first off, there's a certain kind of convenience it represents. More so when you work 8 hours and dig a ditch for 8 hours, or you're a sewing machine operator for 8 hours, your energy that you spent over there, you now get it in exchange as cash. Now you're carrying cash around for energy that you spent, or that you used somewhere else. But it's pretty limited, and it's not playing with the overall picture.
So I hear what you're saying, Jim, in terms of prosperity being a basically a false advertisement, and I agree with you in that our society promotes a fictitious type of prosperity that only benefit a few, not the whole, and which is selfish and greedy. And is it the best option for us? Who knows? We don't know, because we don't know all the information that's available to us in the universe. But one of the things that I do think maybe that you're trying to say, and maybe I'm wrong, is that prosperity is not a heartfelt energy or frequency or way of life or perception that people encompass or embrace or empower in our system. It's completely unjustified in the way that we utilize it now, and only a few benefit from it out of either selfish or greedy reasons or whatever. Does that make sense to you?
Well, to me, there's only one model, and it can be seen in nature. I think the humans, first off, I'm one of them. I think we're dysfunctional as hell. There's conversation out there right now about how much harassment there is by women just walking on the sidewalk, cat calls and all this stuff. It is completely, it's Stone Age. It is absolutely Stone Age. And it's because we're out of sync with our natural state. We're running on empty. And yeah, there's a lot of good things that are going on. There's no doubt about it. But if we wanted to become a planet going into the solar system, I guarantee you what we have to offer right now is dysfunctional as hell. And I think there's a lot of people out there that if they knew how to have one foot in the new world and one foot, in other words, maintain their old things and start working on new stuff, again, re-enabling our natural state of connection. This is what I've spent 40 years on. I've been meditating 40 years. I've been paying attention for 40 years, longer than that actually. And I think the humans need to kind of take their world back instead of buying into what somebody. There's a certain mentality of certain kinds of leaders.
Yeah, but how, Jim? How do people? How do we take our world back? How do we bring nature back? How do we embrace nature again? How do we live nature again?
Good question. Glad you asked. First off, let me throw out an idea.
All right.
Everybody's familiar with Dr. David Hawkins and his first
David Hawkins. That's the name I was looking for the other day. Yeah, but go ahead.
Good for you. There's synchronous. So Dr. David Hawkins, in his book Power versus Force, he came up, it's the first time he published the map of consciousness. And the map of consciousness is an arbitrary map for people who aren't familiar with it. It's based on kinesiology. When I say arbitrary, it's a scale of 0 to 1,000, and 0 to just under 200 are the states of apathy, fear, grief, anxiety, rage, up through pride at 175. And from 700 to 1,000 are the states of enlightenment. So it's a exponential. It's a graduating scale, and it's an exponential scale. So 700 is far.
That 700 is also the energy where gratitude is at.
I can barely hear you.
The 700 is where. Oh, you can't hear me at all?
No, I can hear you. I just can't hear you well.
Oh, okay. a 700 is where the energy of grace and gratitude are
Okay,
located.
well, actually, I would say that it's under 700 because enlightenment starts at 700. But you're right. So let me continue. The middle of the scale, 200 to 700, is the state where most of us are at. That's where you're going to find neutrality, spiritual reason, satisfaction, joy, peace, love, unconditional love higher up. Gratitude is part of that. There's two interesting points on this map by Hawkins. One is that the break point on the map is at 200, and 200 is labeled courage. So for whatever it is we have in our lives, to have more, especially people down there in fear and grief and the lower realms, to have more takes courage. And I will say anybody in the higher realms, to have more takes courage as well. But the break point on the map is courage, and that's where things start to get positive. Well, the other point on this map is that one person at 700 counterbalances the negativity of 70 million people below 200. One person. One person at 600 counterbalances the negativity of 10 million people below 200. One person at 500, I think it's probably 900,000. And what the point is as we become more conscious, we become more capable of contribution. And that's how we're going to turn the world around. And that's why I say re-enabling our natural state of connection. What is meditating but becoming quiet for what? For that inner journey, that inner connection. What is yoga but for that quiet and the access to that inner self? And there's people practicing this, but and I'm not going to say they don't. What I've discovered is the game is to partner with something that's bigger than ourselves, something that's eminently successful, something that's always been there. I use prosperity as an analogy, but really what we're talking about is advancing personal consciousness, for which there's an exponential aspect to it. And it's not about 51% of the vote at all. It's not about, there's a lot of people that have a lot of potential that may never express it. But there's people who, by having access to meditating and access to fancier tools like core resonance and the different things, that we can advance our consciousness faster. And what we want to do is ground, if you will, for lack of a better expression, ground God on this plane. Now that's an expression I haven't used before, but what we are is we're means by which innate intelligence expresses through us into this dimension.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
And what we have to do is get rid of all the distortion so that when innate intelligence, God, source, whatever you want to call it, expresses through us, and by the way, delivers solutions, because what is the universe but ever unfolding and solutions oriented? So our job is to become clear. Why in the world did we start meditating when we were 23 or 30 or 40 years old? Or why were we ever drawn to that? We want the quiet, and in that inner discovery we find we have trauma that we carry, and there's tapping, and there's all kinds of ways people are clearing trauma. Why are they doing that? It's natural to want to make that introspective journey for the people that are capable. It's just natural to do it. And I tell you that that's where prosperity is going to end up coming from. Re-enabling our natural state of connection, delivering solutions into this dimension. And so that's, to me, what prosperity is all about.
Okay. So what's your point, Jim? No, just kidding. So,
well, let me say this. My work is about re-enabling our natural state of access to guidance, because in guidance, in presence, we have guidance, and in guidance, I'll give you another way to define it or describe it. Joe Dispenza, in the book What the Bleep, stated that the brain consciously processes 2,000 bits of information a second. That is a woefully low number, especially per second. 2,000 bits of information per second at a conscious level. And there's 400 billion bits of information out there ever changing as potential. So if the conscious brain is plodding along at 2,000 bits a second in a sea of 400 billion bits of information, let me tell you, is the brain on overload, and I guarantee you the brain was never designed to process the world. We have access to guidance just like everything else does, and that's how I use the analogy of nature. Nature is totally plugged in. That's why it thrives. You know, thrives and prosperity are similar words. And so, you know, I use the...
Well, earlier, I think what I heard you saying is that, and this is what I was talking about yesterday, and the ascension process is that inevitably you need to allow prosperity to flow through you, just to surrender to it, to that whatever you want to call it, and in order for it to flow through you naturally, in your natural state.
Right. Of course, exactly. Yes, that's what we're doing here is re-enabling our natural state, so that prosperity, so that thriving, so that all of these things that the rest of nature, to me, nature is just a great example. Everything's plugged into everything else. Yeah, things become extinct, but it just goes on. It goes on. It goes on. Humans, the way we're operating, we've got a dead end coming up. I mean, it's not being negative. It's when we're out of sync with the bigger picture, we're not going to overcome the bigger picture. And if we're out of sync with it, when you have, 15,000 feet of water out in the ocean, 15,000 feet is 3 miles down. That's a lot of water. And when you're 1,000 miles out and the water is 15,000 feet deep and you've got human trash out there, we're starting to load this thing up. You got all the trash in orbit and all this stuff. We're leaving trash on the moon, and it can't continue.
Well, and that's the other part of the equation, is that you can either allow it to flow through you naturally, which is healthier for you anyhow, and allows you to come from your heart space, or you can force it, and some people are able to successfully do that, but how far will they get with that process? It's undetermined, but I don't think that it'll be a long-lived process. They might be able to do it for 1 or 2 or 3 generations, but whole systems fall down sooner or later if their foundation isn't concrete. If it isn't a good foundation, any system will fall.
Well, that's the point. I'm not picking on humans. I'm just saying
I hear you.
If they can't get in sync with the bigger game, they're not going to get to be here. And like I say, exporting, being the first one to have cannons on Saturn and Mars and whatever, I mean, give me a break.
Yeah, I mean, and there are big, huge corporations that have come down because they weren't incorporating the natural state of order of things and their natural way of life into their systems, and maybe they started out that way, and maybe that's why they were able to get as far as they're getting. But the ones that either are straying away from that or didn't start out to in that way to begin with are the ones that are falling apart and coming down.
Well, let me say this though. First off, all of this is evolution of the species, and we're going to come up with a point here where we're going to make a choice, and we're going to flop over to the side of alignment with what's true and go on, or we're going to fight it tooth and nail and do it our own way till I think we eliminate ourselves. But in the meantime, I'm not against money, because money makes it easy to pay your electric bill. Instead of going over to the electric company and offering to dig 6 feet of ditch for them to get your electricity for a month, it's easier to dig your ditch over somewhere else, get paid, give it to the electric company. So, the people that invented this stuff, it's not all bad, and that's not what I'm trying to suggest. But at the same time, in our evolution, and it's internal inside of so many of us, that there's more to it than spending 40 years with your job.
Exactly.
You know, there's a lot more to it, and I kind of marvel at people who go through life and they decide what they're going to be when they're young, and maybe they have a meltdown when they're 40. I don't know, but how people decide what they're going to be when they're young and go to school for it, and of course, you know, all that shifts and changes, and it's all part of the process. So if I am or was sounding negative about, you know, what we're dealing with, I think the snapshot is we got kind of a tough time right now. We've got more wars. We're so broke, but we got more money for more wars, and
but I hear what you're saying, Jim. Earlier you say that the way that our society is dealing or working with prosperity is a very limiting factor. And you're right. It's not the worst system in the world that we're living in right now, but it could still be a lot better. There's still room for a lot more improvement than it is right now. Absolutely, I hear you 100%.
Well, and so this is the evolution. You see, the evolution of the species, and what I try to do is say, hey, I see this from a mechanical perspective because I can look in nature and see how it operates. I can see that the humans are out of sync with that, and so in 40 years of meditating, I spent most of my years believing that meditation was, or I interpreted meditating as learning how to listen with my nervous system. And the last couple of years of meditating, I more describe meditation as unconditional love. It's the practice of non-resistance to whatever's going on. The phone goes off, whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. You meditate to become quiet, and in that becoming quiet, there becomes more available than you find in the noisy world. And there's more and more people naturally drawn to that. And see, that's the evolution. What I want to do is, when I say speed it up, I think that there's cutting edges of the mechanics of how we do the shift. In other words, it's not just going to, well, I won't say it's not just going to happen, but you'll find that there's edges of this encroachment of the new way that carries tools and delivery systems for quieting our nervous systems. In other words, the idea that our nervous system is our center. You know, a lot of people would say it's the heart. Well, I say it's the nervous system. I say, so what I'm about is when we have a coherent nervous system, we have resonance with the cosmos. And when we have resonance with the cosmos, we have access to anything and everything. And I don't think any of the problems on this planet are even remotely bigger than the scale of order that we could plug into as we learn how.
Exactly.
I think that's where we're going. That's prosperity. That's prosperity.
Well, in going back to your meditation, which I think also is prosperity in its own right, is basically listening, but also not only learning to be in harmony, but practicing to be in harmony with your surroundings, with the universe. Period. And I think that's a good, sure way to learn how to be prosperous within your own right as well.
Well, you know, along that idea, I started meditating when I was 23, and by the time I was 30, I retired. Now, I used meditating and goal setting. I didn't use them at the same time, but meditation quieted my brain. And goal setting was a powerful component of going forth in my life. And maybe the goal setting in part came from quieting my brain. And you know, I did very well. By the time I was, you know, my gosh, my English teacher let me out of high school, so I don't have any of that formal stuff. I had a 40-foot sailboat by the time I was 26, and I was achieving everything I wanted to. It was like I was very prosperous when I was a kid, and it was a product. And meditation was what gave me that center. And so here we are, all these many years later, and there's an enormous amount of good stuff going on. There absolutely is.
So Jim, I got to say this. I've been meditating since I was, let me see, 26. I think 26, 27 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't retired yet. So what's up with that program?
I don't know. You look pretty retired to me. You got your picture behind you. You got Aloha and Spiritual Productions. You could be doing this on a boat in Bahamas somewhere. None of us would know it. You're probably fibbing to us as it is. You're probably
Oh, it's gonna be like that. Okay, so we got about 7 minutes left. Is there anything else you want to put out there that we haven't talked about yet? You talked about a special offer and some other stuff. So
well, let me say this. First off, I have a lot of background in meditation, and meditation takes a long time to build up a lot of years of meditating. 40 years.
Training program, absolutely.
And a number of years ago, I was introduced to neurofeedback. I actually sold $1 million worth of neurofeedback for somebody else, but I sold it based on ideas in my first book. And the idea is that our nervous system is our connection, and re-enabling or cleaning up our nervous system, knocking down the trauma and clearing the trauma and those kinds of things is really important. But so our nervous system is like a living antenna system. And second, if we want to jump ship from what we are and become more than what our DNA and our environment says we are and pretty much projects forward, that's what we will be. If we want to become more than that, we need to partner with something bigger than ourselves. And that's what I call innate intelligence. So core resonance is about re-enabling this natural state of connection, becoming a recipient of the good of all of that. There's another variation on the definition of prosperity. And so core resonance training is a relatively expensive item. I think in California, they sell lots of sessions and this and that. But what I've done is I came up with another program, which actually happened to be written in 2007 as well, the same time as the Free Cell and the Keys of the Universe, and it's called the 100-Day Prosperity Plan. It's not as sophisticated as core resonance training at $13,000, but we can use the mind in a very, very effective manner, and the mind is patterns and habits, and if we can train the mind in a certain manner, we can learn to see differently, and that's what the 100-Day Prosperity Plan is about. And I kind of call it right now my middle tool. And I do have a special on that. You can go to coreresonance.com/special and see what that is. And it's only going to be up for a few days. It's very limited. It's a very special price. But at the same time, in other words, I would like to try to give you maybe a pathway. And what I would do is I would start out with Free Cell and the Keys of the Universe. You can go to my website, Core Resonance. It's a free download. It's 6 or 7 days of instructions and learning how to play Free Cell and discovering that as you start to lose a game, because what does losing a game means? It means you're not seeing moves. If you will stop the game before you lose, as you start to lose and you don't see moves, and come back to it later, you'll see moves you didn't see. And I'll tell you what, that's how I finished my first book. It was a major effort to finish a 93,000 word book that I didn't plan on writing in the first place. 13 chapters and.
Oh, just 93,000 pages. Is that what you said?
I'll tell you what. I hope I got a 5th book coming. The 4th one sits there almost done, so I have 3 right now, and they're a lot of work. But I never would have completed it if I couldn't see. The game showed me that there were solutions if but I could see them. In other words, there were always solutions. And so people listening to this, I'd like to encourage them to go to coreresonance.com, do the Free Cell and the Keys to the Universe. I would definitely look at the 100-Day Prosperity Plan. These are intermediate tools. I also offer coaching where we emulate the concepts of non-resistance. And in other words, clients that I work with are in different kinds of relationships that they need to clean up because they're stuck. And usually people are stuck in something or other. And so I use the concepts of the work that I've been doing to help people clear situations and then put them on a track in a course that's much more useful, i.e., a lot of people have goals, but really if you're going to have a goal, you might as well have an ultimate goal, and the ultimate goal is re-enabling a natural state of connection. And from
So
there,
basically getting back to nature. Is that what you're saying?
well, let's, that sounds a little bit Davy Crockett-ish. So what we want to do is we want to plug into what's true. You can
Okay.
see what's true out there in nature. Do we need to get back to nature and we need to live in greenhouses? I want to have a greenhouse attached to my house, but that's not what it's about. We don't need to go live under the trees. What we need to do is plug into what's true. Those trees express the way they do with no resistance. The humans need to express the way they do with no resistance. There's prosperity.
So you can get back to your true self in any system that's out there. The whole idea is that in that process, in order to get back to your true self, you have to get back into your heart space in order for that to happen. Is that what I hear you saying?
Well, we haven't talked about the heart, really.
I mean, if you want to get to what's real, that's where it's really at. That's where it's absolutely worth it.
Yes, it is.
If you're going to be the realest you want to be, you can be. You have to get back into your heart space and stay there and maintain yourself.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And you're going to be prosperous, for sure.
And the question is, can it be done from the perspective of the mind? And I say, generally speaking, the answer is not, because there's a big difference between focus and intention. And there's a whole world of how the mind works, how patterns and habits work. And if we could just do it, we would. And denial has nothing to do with it. Allowing, I just wrote a really interesting article about the difference.
So we're out of time, Jim, and I want to thank you for being here. And that all can be another webinar / presentation further down the road. But I want to appreciate you coming here and sharing with us about prosperity. And then, like I said, we're going to be looking to do some workshops and classes and stuff down the road. So we can talk about some of that stuff later on.
So thank you for getting to the bottom of this with me, because we started off a little bit, not you and I, but it took a while to get to what we were trying to define. And I want to thank you for what we've accomplished today, and ask everybody to come by my site and take a look at what's going on.
Awesome. Have a God-Goddess week. Be the love that you are, always have been, and always will be. Aloha.
Namaste.